The Epstein files may end up determining the path of humanity. And I don't say that dramatically. I say it soberly. Every society, whether we admit it or not, has a moral floor. There are things we debate endlessly: policy, economics, ideology, but there are certain lines that are not up for discussion. Harm to children is one of those lines. That is not political. That is not partisan. That is not philosophical. It is a line that almost every human being across culture and belief systems recognizes as being kind of sacred. Even in prison systems, there's an understood hierarchy of wrongdoing. There are crimes that even among criminals are considered beyond the pale. And that tells you a little something fundamental about human conscience. There are some boundaries we instinctively know must never be crossed. So we are clear on that. Now, there is a deeper layer. History shows us that power protects itself. Influence protects itself. Systems tend to shield those that are at the top. We've seen financial collapse where ordinary people paid the price. We've seen governments overreach. We've seen corruption surface and then quietly disappear into complexity and distraction. Sometimes people fought back. Sometimes people felt powerless. Sometimes we were simply overwhelmed or divided and even distracted. When a society tolerates moral compromise at the highest levels, it doesn't stay contained up there. It trickles down. It shows up in the broken trust. It shows up in the people losing faith in institutions. It shows up in the families who feel like the system doesn't work for them anymore. It shows up in everyday conversations where people say, "What's the point? They always get away with it anyway." But when the allegations touch the most sacred moral boundary we have as a civilization, something shifts. Because now the question is not political preference. The question is integrity. If we as a collective look at the worst of the worst and decide it's just easier to move on, easier to scroll, easier to argue about red versus blue, then we are silently redefining our standards. We're telling ourselves that morality is flexible when power is involved. And that has severe consequences. Not mystical consequences, not apocalyptic predictions, but real ones, cultural ones, even spiritual ones. If we shrug, scroll, get distracted, and move on, then we are quietly saying something about ourselves. We are saying this is acceptable. We're saying that there are different rules for different people. We're saying that power matters more than principle. And that would be a sad day, because at that point, we're basically saying, just go ahead and do whatever you want. Just make sure you're powerful enough to get away with it. And that's simply not the kind of world any of us want to live in. Instead, we put our foot down calmly, lawfully, but firmly and say, enough is enough. You've taken this too far. This line cannot be crossed no matter who you are. Then we're saying something else completely. We're saying that we're worth more than that. We're saying our kids are worth more than that. We're saying that there is no level of influence that puts someone above basic human decency. And when a society actually draws a line and holds it, something changes. People remember their power. We remember that we do have a voice, that we can demand transparency, that we can expect accountability, that we deserve justice. That standard doesn't disappear just because someone is rich or famous or well-connected. And that memory matters, because when other issues come up, economic decisions, political overreach, corruption, whatever it may be, we won't feel helpless. We'll remember that we stood up before. We'll remember that we didn't just roll over and die. We'll remember that the rules apply to everyone. That's not about rage. It's about self-respect. And over time, maybe years or maybe even decades, that kind of collective self-respect strengthens a culture. This is us literally evolving as a society. Humanity is strengthening what it's capable of by redefining new levels of morals and virtue and integrity. This raises the bar. It forces systems to adjust. It makes it harder for anyone at any level to assume they can just operate without consequences. This is where I believe the idea of conscious evolution, spiritual awakening, expansion of the human experience, however you want to phrase it, becomes real. Not as a slogan, not as a hashtag, not as some mystical buzzword. What it means to be bound by morals, love, and compassion becomes a reality. A conscious society isn't one that meditates more. It's one that refuses to abandon its moral standards when it's inconvenient or simply because we're too easily distracted. It's one that can set aside political jerseys long enough to say, if this were happening to someone I love, to my spouse or my siblings, or God forbid, my children, I wouldn't care what party was involved. I'd want justice. Period. This moment is an opportunity to decide who we are through the lens of morals, integrity, and virtue. Do we drift into cynicism and apathy, or do we raise our standards and say collectively, we're better than this? Because how we respond right now won't just affect headlines. It will shape the kind of society our kids inherit. Don't get distracted. Make this as important as it is by not letting go and returning to your routine and pretending everything will just work out. Spread awareness. Call on your representatives for accountability and justice. Do not let this go. And most importantly, set the example of what it means to love and to be of compassion and empathy and grace and patience and unity, and hold integrity and morals and virtue in your day-to-day life with those that matter the most. With everybody. Be the change you want to see in our human evolution. Spiritual awakening doesn't just happen somewhere off in the distance. It happens in your heart and in your home with your family and your community. And that spreads. That is a potent and powerful force that helps us to make this world a better place.